Children are just immortal beings in small bodies. They need to be held responsible like the rest of us.
Promise to help get ethics in on this planet and universe, which is the basic purpose of the Sea Org.
You need to stop committing these overts. This better not come up in your next session.
I promise to accept and fulfill to the utmost of my ability the responsibilities entrusted to me, whatever they may be, and wherever they may carry me in the line of duty.
I don't want to hear it. Write up your OWs.
I promise through my actions to increase the power of the Sea Org and decrease the power of any enemy.
You can't just leave.
Protecting the church is more important than family.
Welcome back to the Children of Scientology channel as we continue exploring and exposing Scientology for children. Today, we continue our Cadet Org series, which is a look back at what it was like to be born in or trafficked into Scientology's Sea organization as a child, given no options or safe off-ramp. Once there, your only future is to be hammered into an asset and a future Sea Org member for 1 billion years. On behalf of all children raised in Scientology, we appreciate you being here and helping us spread the message that Scientology is not appropriate for children. Scientology does not believe in childhood. This is dangerous.
So here we have two separate documents. Here we have on the left, I was recently forwarded a letter that you sent to Samantha. This is one of the ones I tried to sneak to her somehow. Because of your status, I am your Scientology terminal per HCO policy letter of blah, 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 the same shit that we've already said. And it will assist you on handling your status. I have asked that the papers you requested be sent to me so that I can forward them to you. But you should have this shortly. Is this the correct address to forward to you in the future? Let me know if you have any questions. So he's verifying my address so that he could basically send me divorce papers. The closing where they always use love, it's so odd. And I know the only reason they do it is because Hubbard used to always say, love Ron, love Ron, love Ron. And in normal culture, I remember when I came out and I was in the military and I had signed something like love Mike. And one of my people I worked with are like, why did you write that, bro? And I'm like, oh, what should I write? He's like, I don't know. Sincerely,
Like
best,
regards,
like something other than love. That is a very personal way to sign something. He's like, you're responding to a superior and saying, love Mike. That's strange. You can't do that. And I was like, oh, my bad. It's outside of the societal norm where the second you incorporate that, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And Dave would do the same thing. He would send you just this blistering
Horrible,
fucking
shitty
response
crap.
to something, just telling you what an absolute suppressive person. And at the end of it would be love Dave. You're like, he literally is telling me that I'm going to be trashed. And it says love Dave at the end. And this is sort of the indoctrination and changing the words and what these things mean. And it does two things. One, I think you might say, well, maybe they're just love bombing you. Maybe it's just all happiness. No, I think that it undercuts what love actually means. Like the word love is a very strong word and it kind of means, you know, it means
something.
It means something. And it's like you are willing to be there and do something for somebody no matter what. And there's a lot that you could read into that. But when they say love with something like this, they mean the exact opposite of that. But it undercuts that word to make it not important.
When your parents talk to you, I feel like for me anyways, it was not love, mom. It was admiration. I have such high admiration for you. Like they robbed the love piece. And the one that actually mattered was admiration. I admire you so much. I have so much admiration.
Hey, so I hear you're trying to get a hold of your wife. Yeah, we were able to stop that. I was able to get a hold of it and she didn't get that
Love
shit.
you.
Is this a good address for you? Love Mike Ellis.
You're back on your bike.
Oh my God.
Ride around. Yeah.
I tried to call him recently, just by the way, and the receptionist at the HCB had me on hold. She'd gone back and forth with Mike Ellis and he wasn't taking my call. And she comes back on and she's, oh, he doesn't speak to people on the phone. And I'd questioned her on it. And she said something like, oh, I've just spoken to him just now and he's told me that he won't take the phone call. I was like, oh, you're joking, right? Because I'm in Australia. So you want me to send a letter in the mail? Can't I send an email? And she was like, no, he doesn't have an email address that you can send to. And I was like, what? So my own terminal.
You could telex him.
No, not anymore. Yes.
Have an OT send your thoughts, or you could mail it to him. Yeah.
So He's my only contact in the whole Scientology world, meaning I can't have any contact with my brother, which is the person that I was wanting to speak to. But my only way of communicating is by letter in the mail.
They won't receive the certified mail. If you send a certified letter, they'll reject it.
Yeah. Oh,
Because that's what, like, usually attorneys and process servers and stuff, they'll send certified
right.
because that way when it's received, the post office will say, "Hey, this was delivered on this
Sign
date
it.
and was signed for by
Mhm.
somebody." They will reject them. If you
Mhm.
wanna know, "Hey, I wanna make sure I get a letter to Mike Ellis because he just said here he's my only terminal that I can talk to. I can't talk to
Right.
my wife, I gotta talk to Mike." They have so many control mechanisms in place, it's unbelievable. And another thing that's interesting is they've come up with a filing system to track all this stuff. On normal
Mhm.
Scientology correspondence, it doesn't include a barcode system, but they've started barcoding anything that goes to potential
Right.
suppressive persons so they can have this stuff documented very closely. If you see that, you'll see on all of these senior HCO things, they include barcodes because they must have some sort of file system in
Oh.
place. I at least have some stuff to share. They have more stuff than I do. They have kept
Mhm.
everything I've sent them or anybody. It
Oh.
is very well documented. It's even freaking barcoded. I was told when I left, it just got worse and worse and worse
Mhm.
there. And it was like, I don't know how bad that would have gotten. I'm glad I got out when I did because my God. That's what my
Mhm.
mom's now told me. She's Mike, I'm so glad you left when you did. You're able to do something
Mhm.
with your life, and it just got worse after that. And I was just like, it's
It's
pretty fucking
so
bad when I was there.
it's
That's
so
true, yeah.
interesting to hear over and over that over time it's just got because you thought it was bad when you were there. You thought your
Right.
experience was bad, but really it just ramped up, ratchet.
But I have heard the same thing that it got far worse after. See, I left 2002, I left the Sea Org. And so our time frames are kind of close together. They had had several evolutions, and whenever an evolution comes out, it's a crazy town in there. But then
Yeah.
also they really hammered down these ethics handlings and these like reprogramming. Yeah, just nonsense and
Yeah,
horrific.
next big bad thing to happen in 2004, they, like, kicked a lot of the marketing and compilations people, like, at least 50 to 100 people from Golden Era Productions were rounded up and shipped off in March of 2004. They just rounded them up on a bus one night, took them all out to the It Ranch property, that Happy Valley, Castillo Canyon School. It has a bunch of different names. They took them out there and for about 2 weeks had them basically being intensively sec checked to either be sent to an RPF, either in pack or flag, or offloaded from the Sea Org with a bunch of scare tactic shit going on with lawyers. I mean, it was nasty. That's when I think that they were kicking out a lot of the creative personnel that were in marketing were being gotten rid of at that time. And a lot of them then ultimately ended up leaving either during the RPF
Mhm.
program or shortly thereafter. But my mother was one of those, and they ended up getting rid of her because then by this point, Ronnie and Biddy Miscavige were gone and I had blown. So they were trying to find a reason, and they then sent her to the RPF for Ronnie Miscavige assaulting her, was what her crimes she was guilty of and why she then spent 6 years on the RPF.
Yeah.
I was thrown out with the garbage.
And what's really, I mean, that's a horrible story. You've covered that in some of your interviews, and so I feel like it's the sexual harassment and the sexual discrimination and like all of these things. But I guess that stuff doesn't matter when it's for a church because no laws apply. It's just insane to me
Mhm.
that that's okay, and even within the
Well, it's not
Scientology
okay. We should say, yeah,
no, it's
it's
not
not
okay, but
okay.
even
Yeah.
but even within the Scientology Sea Org bubble that that there's an ethics and a justice system, and so how is this just? How is this okay? It just doesn't even make any sense. It's this weird, crazy double standard cognitive
Yeah.
dissonance sickness.
Justice never seemed to apply to perpetrators of sexual assault or sexual abuse. The people who were higher up, they understood that these things were crimes. The same reason why they never put my father on the RPF. It's so strange, but they prevented justice to perpetrators of sexual assault and sexual abuse specifically.
I feel like also Jenna Miscavige, didn't she have an out 2D or premarital sex with Dallas? And they didn't go to the RPF. They just got a handling. So it
Right.
very much could
And
have been the Miscavige name as well.
it was, and I think that anyone around Dave,
Mhm.
he was trying to insulate, not for their benefit, which you can see that very clearly in Jenna's book,
Right.
at the hands of Dave and Shelley. She was badly abused in that whole situation. Basically, when she was a teenager, I think was when it really got
Mhm.
bad for her with respect to that.
Mhm.
It's when her parents fell out of favor. But a lot of the things that I think were being done was for Dave and Shelley to be able to keep the image for them as pristine
yeah.
as possible. And that's what my mother, the situation she found herself in, because it was RTC, Marty Rathman, and actually Claire was one of the sec checkers on this too that found out about it. And we've talked about it a little bit too, that were investigating Ronnie Miscavige and found out what he was doing with my mother, making her give him massages, exposing himself, like things of this nature. When RTC found out about it, she was then investigated, treated like a criminal, but she was very much the victim in the situation. And then ultimately, she was sent back to post. She was busted from her post and put on heavy manual labor and then removed from her position there. And his only penance was not having an assistant anymore to be at his beck and call. Hey, man, you can't, show your junk to your assistant or else you're going to lose your assistant. You need to get back to work. That was his penance. Humanity is not part of the equation. You're there to work for the organization, and really, we don't give a shit about it. And I think that they have an interest and a benefit to separate people geographically and mentally from their families so that they can control them more heavily. They made an easy way for him to do so.
I agree. Well, I think there's two things. There's power and there's access. Well, there's three, because then there's also the malignant will to do the destructive act. And to create harm against another person, you have to have the malignant will. You have to want to do it. They give the people the power. The power is not built necessarily on merit, right? And then they give people the access. They give them ultimate access to another human being. They give them power over the other human being. Protections are removed and power is violated and all those sorts of things that happens.
I agree with that.
Now, this is an interesting letter. So
This was interesting.
my mother had disconnected from me. Remember, we got the disconnection letter from my mother. I knew she was on the RPF. I was concerned
September
as
or
to how
something.
she was. She was in contact with one of her brothers and sisters, my Aunt Sharon. And Aunt Sharon was still writing to her. So I was like, hey, could you incorporate into the letter to my mother? And my middle name is Robin, which can sound like a boy or a girl. And she just said Robyn, not IN. Like Robin Williams is IN, but a girl's name is usually YN. So my aunt had written and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that Robin is doing really well. And just to kind of communicate with her that I'm doing fine, because I wasn't able to communicate how I was. And a lot had happened in my life. I was now, I think, on my first combat deployment. And I just wanted to talk to my mom. So my aunt had included this in here, and I'll just read it for you real fast. This is my mother's response. And I again asked her this. And she said she had gotten this when she was in the RPF and it came up in one of her sessions, the letter from my aunt. And then she was being then grilled in ethics about it. So she then had to handle this as a PTS situation so that she could continue with her program. So I was basically making problems for her. But my aunt is Sharon. So, dear Sharon, I got your Christmas card and hope you received mine too. I hope you had a great Christmas. I sure did! Exclamation point. Yeah, I'm sure you did, Mom. There's something that I want to bring out in the open. I received this letter from Robin, and this is obviously really from Michael. As you referenced Robin in your Christmas card, I figure you know what it is I'm talking about. I want you to know that here is where it stands with Michael and I. Michael left his job at the church, left his wife, and left me without a single word of what he was doing and that he was upset. He has never made up for this with the church. He knows what he needs to do to get back in good standing with the church and thus have his communication back open with me. He must do this so that he can ethically continue with his life. Then Mike and I can have an honest communication between us. I'm doing some special training right now, which has enabled me to help another person. And I have sorted out things for myself that I've wanted to do for many years. I feel better and brighter than I have in my whole life, and I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. We have a new year now, and I know it will be a good one. I want to be straight and honest with our communication between us. Are you writing letters to me for Michael, or did you just forward the letter from Robin for him? Either way, I'm not communicating to Mike until he is in good standing with the church. Please let me know what happened on this. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Have a happy new year. Love, Rosemary.
She has to clarify the line here, right? The enemy line, because her sister has forwarded on this suppressive communication. And then she's got to figure out like where that's at. Okay. Because then is the next step going to be to disconnect from her sister if
Right.
she is in fact forwarding? Yeah. Anyways, you could tell us more
Willingly,
about
yeah.
this, but yeah.
Yeah. So again, this is in an effort to have a conversation, and they can't allow this. So with this, I asked her, "Hey mom, what was going on at this point?" She was like, "I kept getting you trying to communicate with me, and it kept being a problem where I was getting yelled at on the RPF by my twins and everyone else because this was creating a PTS situation, and I had to then handle it. All I was trying to do was talk to my mother and let her know that I was doing okay, and, hoping she was doing okay, because I mean, it's been a few years. She's, in her late 50s, early 60s. She's in like this thought reconditioning camp doing heavy manual labor. I think a son should be interested in what the fuck's going on with his mom. So I can't get a conversation in. So I'm trying to figure out a way to do it. And so when you wrote this, were you alone? And she's, no, I had people standing over me the whole time. And she was being made to do it, very
It's-
deliberately controlled on what to write, to make sure addressing certain things, while she's reinforcing how happy she is to be on the RPF and how it's helping her help another person. It's allowing me to help another person. What does that mean?
She's in a prison program writing this, talking about fair roads, fair weather, whatever, how great things are. And also, I got another person through who's her twin that she's required to take through this prison program with her. And it's just striking to me the angle of the writing seems really coerced or something.
You're writing this in front of an MAA, and this is going to be read by somebody, and this is part of a PTS handling. Her sister's not a civilian Scientologist, never has been, is just a raw meat public, and that could potentially be creating another PTS situation because of her suppressive son. And that's what she's being made to deal with.
It's just like a hostage letter or something.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right.
Look what we get from Mike Ellis and Bruce Wagner. So here we have basically, this is in the end of 2003, and then later in 2004, what I actually get. These are basically the divorce letters that we get. This is, so I'm getting from Bruce Wagner. I'm writing to you and to send you papers enclosed on Sam's behalf. These are divorce papers that are being served to you. So I'm getting a letter from the port captain's office, the legal director, basically saying, hey, we're serving you your divorce papers. He said, you need to basically send these and sign these and send them back to me, and they'll take care of the filing fees. Don't worry about it. We got it all under control. That's pretty much what he's saying here. And I never signed them and sent them back. I was like, this smells like shit. I'm not even going to do that. And that's when I tried to write letters, get a hold of Samantha, figure out what's going on, to no avail. And then finally, over on the right side, Mike Ellis does me the solid of sending me the divorce papers after I had sent that really shitty message that I sent, like saying, hey man, I know you're hiding her somewhere. I'll find her if you don't send me divorce papers. This is him doing that. And it's, dear Mike, enclose the divorce papers that you requested. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it, brother. If you have no intent of doing the A to E to be restored to good standing, it is your choice. I do ask, though, that any communications that you send be sent to the IJC as your only Scientology terminal per policy. Should you decide to return to the church, please let me know, and I will assist you in taking these steps necessary to do so. Much love, Mike Ellis, International Justice Chief. This one didn't have the barcode, which I was kind of disappointed in. I don't know why the other ones did, but anyway, it's unfortunate. So I'm being served and basically given, after I had sent a nastygram, this is who you get divorce papers from, not your spouse. You get them from Mike Ellis. So Scientology not only filtered all of the communication through this entire thing, but then actually made the divorce process happen so that they could then continue to employ my ex-wife, and hopefully not make that troublesome for her, having to deal with a divorce herself after 9 years of marriage.
So ugly.
So strange. Just from an interpersonal perspective, it's very odd. What church would actually do this? I can't think of anything other than just a coercive cult, but think about just an organization. Hey, I work for Microsoft and, I need HR to work my divorce for me. They'd be like, none of this makes sense unless you've been indoctrinated into this. It's just to control the information flow 100%. And if they lose any amount of that information flow, they could lose somebody. And why this was important was Samantha was David Miscavige's makeup artist for all the events. and she would handle that. So she was on COB's lines, is the way that they referred to it. Like she is
That
one of the
makes
people
sense.
that constantly interfaces with him. So this was a fucking problem for them with that I'm being a pain in their ass. And they
That makes
probably
sense.
love the fact that I went and joined the military because it was like, whew, he's out of our hair for a while until I wasn't. So yeah. Anyway,
Well, I love that you got
Um,
much love from Mike Ellis on this one.
I
So
know that wasn't
much
just a
love.
love; it was a much
It's a
love.
much love.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
but also, I just have to underline this on the other side, on the left-hand side. It says, "Don't worry about the blank spaces on the form. I will fill them out." Like, just sign it.
Wait,
He's
what?
like, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, just gonna
Yeah,
sign
yeah.
this."
Go back to the page before this. Look at Mike Ellis's. Okay, they'll go back one more where we find Mike
One more,
Ellis's
yeah.
signature again. All right, so both of these have a very similar signature for Mike Ellis. You see that where it has this like swirly shit? And I would say arguably
Swirly
between the way the M's are structured and the
ease.
swirls, that's the same. Even though it's sloppy,
Mhm.
it's being signed by the same person. Would you agree
Yeah,
with that?
Well, can I ask
I
you,
agree.
what are those swirls? Because there's no O's in his name.
I think those are bicycle tires is what the way that I and
Bicycle.
then look at this Mike
Oh,
Ellis
that's totally a
signature over here.
different person.
Oh, it's
Wow.
totally different.
This is the thing that is very important for everyone to understand. This position of the International Justice Chief, Mike Ellis doesn't mean shit to this organization. Mike
Mhm.
Ellis has no control over anything. It is all controlled by the people in OSA making recommendations up to the very top level of Scientology, who then directs things down. So I'm just showing here, this is an example. Like their international justice chief, they're putting so much weight on the importance of this nobody person. When you go between these two documents, and I have the originals, these are signed by two completely different people. Even the signature
Mhm.
blocks are different. The way that he was written, love versus much love. And then the actual signature itself, Mike Ellis, and between those two
Yeah,
different
it's fake.
penmanships, those are different. So this is just an
Totally
example. And
different.
if anyone wants, this is of how, oh, well, he has his secretary sign shit. Oh, for the thing that basically says that, hey, here's your divorce papers after you were threatening to go like psycho on us. It's being signed by a secretary. Well, the other stuff was like, hey, here's your SP declare. I actually signed that one though. And oh, and I got this letter. I'll go ahead and sign that one as well.
The International Justice Chief, those words make it sound like it's something. The International Justice Chief. What they're primarily doing is just this letter writing back and forth between SPs. That's all this guy's
Mhm.
doing.
Hubbard didn't sign his own stuff, right? My aunt worked for SO1 on the ship, and this policy, every letter sent to me is replied to by me, or whether that stupid policy is not true, because SO1 people answered his letters and signed
Mhm.
his signature. Period. Eventually, it became a stamp, but originally they were all taught to just sign his signature. And that's the founder of this organization who lied and said,
Well,
"I answer all my mail."
it was Guillaume
Yeah.
Leserve later, and it was all answered by a lady named Marge Habscheid, and she would actually respond to all of them and handle all the SO1 traffic back to the people that thought they were writing to Guillaume Leserve as the executive director international. The same shit.
So,
So they just
I-
handle
like,
admin to keep people like subservient.
Totally. And so I was on the RPF at 15, and this particular woman who's the COCMO CW at the time was the one who kept turning down all of my queries and requests and petitions and whatever, because I didn't have a proper RPF assignment. And it ended up being a false RPF assignment. So I asked her about it years later. I'm not going to say her name, and she's like, "Oh, yeah. Everyone in my department handled and signed my dispatches for me because the traffic on my desk was just unbelievable. You have to understand. I didn't see that. I'm not responsible for you being a teenager on the RPF. No ownership whatsoever."
There you go.
Yeah.
And then
There you
this is just a copy of the actual divorce document. None of it's actually signed. I mean, I think that most of this is just some paperwork, but you can see up here is the Gilman Hot Springs up in the upper left corner. This is the Gilman Hot Springs address that both of us had, which was also not only our address that we lived at, but the address that we worked at, which is important for people for human trafficking. That's a consideration. If a person has the same address that they both live and work at, that's a
That's a
problem.
good point.
And
That's a great
yeah,
point.
I just thought that's
Wow,
the main
good
reason why I
point.
included this stuff in there.
Oh, but can I just say over here on page 3, there are no minor children of this marriage. We made sure to that. There are no community assets or debts because we don't pay them. Anyway, yuck.
Yeah, so it's pretty easy to dissolve a marriage in the Sea Org. That's why people get married and divorced so often, because you're just doing paperwork. There's no marital assets. And factually with Samantha and I, she had money that she had gotten for an inheritance to the tune of, probably $20,000 to $30,000, and I
like
didn't want anything from her. All I wanted to do was talk to my wife and at the time and figure out what are we doing together, not what the organization's doing. And that's all I was
like
after.
her mom was from an affluent family in South Africa, right? Or something like that?
Her
Mm,
grandfather had left her money. I mean, the rand,
mm,
it was all in South African rand, and I think their economy kind of tanked. So what was probably a shit ton of money at one point ended up being quite a bit less
mhm.
after apartheid fell and their economy kind of went in the toilet. But still, the point being is there were marital assets, and I could have made a stink about it and said, "Hey, I want half of $20,000," but I had no
State
desire
of
to do that.
California. Yeah.
Yeah, nor
Mhm.
would I just that wasn't the point of trying to communicate. The point of trying to communicate was to have an in-person conversation to sort out our lives, and that was never an opportunity.
It's so interesting to me without any other grounds for a reason for not allowing a husband and wife to do this themselves. It should be illegal. I don't understand what organization or why the courts would allow it unless you were abusive, there was some threat to her. Like, how is this a cool thing to do without two
Mhm.
humans speaking
Yeah.
together about it? I
I
don't
mean,
get it.
yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I know that there's obviously allowances for it if a person doesn't respond, which is because I never responded. She was able to just
Mhm,
process it. So it was able to get processed. We are,
mhm,
in fact, not only did I provide the Little White Chapel drive up window, but the divorce papers. So we've completely bookended this whole thing. But this, at least we've shown the process here. And I know that, you can see the entire process of taking arguably children. We're married. We go through this
Mhm.
life stuff together. And then this is the lengths that they will go to in order to keep people from talking to each other in order to make sure that they get
mhm.
divorced. And there was a
Totally.
whole lot of paperwork
Mhm.
that was being handled by their legal department and by their international
Mhm.
justice chief, which I don't know, aside from, well, as a Scientologist, your only terminal is the international justice chief. Man, that there's so much shadiness in that entire thing that I just thought it would be
Mhm.
interesting to just show it all. Okay, check it
Yeah.
out. Here it is.
Yeah, we don't traffic children, and disconnection is not a thing.
Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. All right. So Mike has moved on in his life.
Mhm.
This is my this
Military.
feels a bit like self
Mhm.
aggrandizement. This is the helicopter that I fly. It's a great thing to fly. This is just a photo of us flying in Afghanistan. And then this is the day that I got back after my last combat deployment. I've done
Mhm.
5 deployments, 2 to Iraq and 3 to Afghanistan, until of about 53 months of deployment time. And these three beautiful ladies were who met me when I got off the plane.
They're just the cutest little things, and I
Well,
guess I feel like, how incredible that you left and went to do the thing that you wanted to do all along, and that you made that and you actually turned into a proper, not a fake military person. Talk about how could you have written this any better? But can you tell me you didn't have your mom in your life, and in your, child rearing of yourself, you didn't really have a role model, and, you weren't surrounded by any parental advocates or whatever, but how was deciding to have kids and then raising kids? Like, how'd you do
With the right person. So I have an
mhm.
amazing wife who has never been in Scientology and has amazing parents who
Mm,
have been there for me very much. They've been there when I leave, when I come back, and now I'm in a situation where I don't have to go on the deployments anymore, which I'm very thankful for. I'm in a
Mhm.
position where I'm an instructor now, so I can take all the experience that I have and now share it with other people. But with having a relationship and having a family with the right person is why I feel like I'm able to enjoy the life that I'm enjoying. So my wife Emily is amazing and she's there for me unconditionally, and I don't know how we would do these things if we weren't doing them together. But she knows that I have probably a degree of dysfunction, and
mhm,
I try to be as patient as possible, but I also know that we weren't raised in a great way and
mhm,
we don't
Mhm.
make any decisions without consulting with one another, and I will default to her in terms of, hey, what's the way we should handle this, especially because
Mhm.
they're girls and they're now bigger than this, and as they start hitting puberty,
Mhm.
I'm like, you need to go talk to your mom. I don't know where you got that stuff, but you need to put it back or go talk to your mom.
That's so great that your wife sounds like she had a stable family upbringing. You said that she has a great family, and I think that is really helpful. I've had to figure out a lot of stuff on my own, like right from even pregnancy all the way through. So it's been an interesting ride.
I can only imagine. I feel very fortunate
Yeah.
and the opportunities that I've had to have
Mhm.
a partner that, and everyone, like even normal people in the real world, have shit that they've dealt with in their life where there's no
Really.
one that is normal. But at least her crazy is different than my crazy. I don't know what we would do with
Yeah.
2 helpings of my crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I defer to is I just defer to my heart. Like what feels right to me inside. What might I have needed in raising children of your own and figuring a lot of these things out? They're navigating a childhood and you get to kind of navigate that with them in a way and learn things along the
And
way. Yeah.
and what's so nice about it is being able to provide them opportunities that I wasn't provided. That's, I think, what I
Mhm.
enjoy. I enjoy every single day with them, but being able to provide them, to ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And to help
Mhm.
them. My oldest is super into science and space. So we've been like, okay, you're going to go to space camp, and I'm going to encourage her to follow her dreams and help her
Mhm.
along the way as she needs to. And I think one of the things that's been hardest from the perspective of where we came from growing up in the Scientology organization was, as I've had the kids and as they're going through these different milestones as they grow up, I then will kind of look at the way my childhood was.
Mhm.
And I have to then process things that are painful for me as I look at
Mhm.
what they're
Yes.
going through now and realizing what I was going through at the time. And then a
Yes.
lot of it is resentment and anger towards my parents. And what the fuck were you people thinking is
Yep.
kind of what I deal with. So,
Totally. That makes sense.
I
I
can
feel like the
totally relate.
reprinting yourself while you're parenting your children is so interesting. And I feel like my knee-jerk reaction was to do the opposite of my mother. Like I was, okay,
Mhm.
whatever she did, I'm going the other way. And eventually I had to come back around to that's probably not wise. I probably do need to do this more with my brain and my heart and not
Mhm.
this opposite reaction. I didn't have kids, but I'm just saying like life choices and things like that. So just brilliant that you
Mhm.
guys have done such an amazing job of navigating it without the role models and no lessons or good examples that you needed and didn't have.
Yeah.
What? There's look at
oh, these
Yeah.
are just some cheese
these
photos.
people. I love them.
Oh, yeah, this is when I was enlisted before I became an officer and a pilot on the left side, and then after one of the missions on the right side. I think we were in Afghanistan back in 2014 with some of my buddies there after one of the flights. I still work with a couple of these gentlemen still today. It's just a good time. We're always yeah, it's Veterans Day. So some people on Facebook, that are military, they'll put their photos. I'm like, "Oh, I'm not gonna do that." Meanwhile, I'm gonna have all this shit that I'm gonna
I'll do it. I'm gonna do it for you. There you go.
put
Okay.
All right. So on the right side, this is just a flight jacket, and then I have my civilian shirt underneath, and then my dress uniform. This is, I think, after I was a junior officer at this point after my first deployment as a pilot. I think it was a formal event that we had gone to. Some of my ribbons, these are actual, either there's different things. Some are like actual awards, and the other ones are kind of service ribbons for time and service and stuff. I transferred from one unit to another one. This is an award that I got. It was an Order of St. Michael. It's something that's provided by one of the organizations that supports Army aviation. So this is just kind of a little narrative about that. This is a funny thing because I've now gone up to the point of kind of the chief pilot in an organization is referred to as the standardization pilot. He's the head instructor pilot that kind of manages the training of the pilots in the unit. So I'm a standardization pilot, and they refer to that person as the SP. So I'm the SP in the unit. So the Army has
Sweet.
decided that I'm an SP. So yeah, I just think it's
That
funny.
is
Okay.
so funny.
CW3 to remind me what that stands for.
So it's CW3, so Chief Warrant Officer 3.
Chief Warrant Officer.
Um,
Do we have that in SEER? Do we have a Chief Warrant Officer?
so you had warrant officers. So
Yeah.
yeah, so for our pilots, there's a classification of Army pilot that's a rank structure for warrant officers. We stay specialized in a technical field. That's really
I
what we
love
do.
it.
So for instance, some officers, they'll kind of go up more of an administrative route. And for warrant officers, you stay focused on a technical job similar to a pilot. The point is to keep you doing that flying mission because it's a very technically involved mission. So, and then over on the right, it's just a simulator and then a cheesy photo on the bottom right of when I was in flight school, just excited to be here and no longer in a cult. So,
I love it.
That's
I love all of them. In
awesome.
fact, you had
Okay.
this one at the top right, actually, I think it was like a family outing and you had your girls maybe also on this helicopter, like they got to go on
yeah.
board it or something. It was a very cool.
Yeah, so I could take them in the simulator. I've taken Rosemary in there too, and you can go they're very realistic.
love it.
So flying her
It's
around
really
and
cool.
stuff, and she's, all excited. Yeah, and then I can take the kids in and fly because you can't actually take them in the real helicopter, only under very specific circumstances. But civilians aren't able to be flown unless they're part of a mission or unless there's certain allowances. But I am able to take people in the simulator when I'm able to get authorization to do so. It's a little easier.
Clearly, I don't know the difference between a simulator and a helicopter because they look the same to me. Any other questions before I go to a couple fun ones?
I have no serious questions to ask. I've just thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and learning all this stuff about you and what you've been through and your life.
So
and
good.
it's so just,
So good.
yeah, really good. I appreciate it so much.
How long before you realized that you were not a Scientologist anymore? Like you left the Sea Org, but how long before you were not a Scientologist?
I
Since
immediately
two-
tried to disassociate from that as because I no longer wanted to consider myself a Scientologist anymore immediately. But I think that the indoctrination, because I had just separated myself from it. At a certain point, I came back. My mother, when she got heart surgery, it was in 2011. I came back, and then RTC was trying to do a cleanup mission, and they had me come and talk to one of their MAs at the time, as Mirriam Powell, as the person I was talking to, her and Mike Sutter. And I was going in there just literally days before this. I was flying combat missions. 2 months before that, I was shot down in Afghanistan and having to recover my crew back to, one of the forward operating bases. So I had just come from a very traumatic event that was completely separate from Scientology. So when I walked back in there, I almost felt like I almost had that as my armor. I'm protected from all of you. And it broke down for me because I hadn't processed anything. The second she asked me one question, well, what would LRH say about that? And it was just like, I didn't know what to respond like that. I thought I would I just locked up. So I've processed a lot since then. If they asked me what would LRH say about that, I'd probably tell them where they could stick it. But I would have an actual, like a good answer for that, like how I disagree with what he says. And we could talk about this. But at the time, I realized that I had never processed anything that had happened to me. And I literally compartmentalized all of it. And I think at that moment, when I then realized, I'm like, I need to stop talking to them because I'm being manipulated by them. I realized at that point that I'm never going to make friends with them again, is when I tried to. And then I found out that they were then starting to extort money from my mother after she had heart surgery and they were making her pay for auditing. I'm like, you criminal assholes. And I wasn't a Scientologist, but that was like similar to when Samantha told me we would get divorced. That was the point of, now you're stealing money from an old lady who literally just had open heart surgery and you're making her pay for her own auditing. That was the point. That was more than just me compartmentalizing it. It helped me realize that they aren't a religion. They are a money grubbing cult. And that was a decision point for me, yeah.
Like becoming aware of the betrayal, really. It's all laid bare. Yeah.
I did the same thing. Compartmentalized, didn't look, tried to find a life, didn't talk to anybody because there's all this shame and stigma around it. But coming back, speaking to other kids and realizing the stuff that I suffered, they also suffered right next to me and I just didn't know it. That was it for me. I was like, bad words to you people. Like that, that weaponized me. And I just realized what deplorable, disgusting, horrible organization it was at that point. Okay. The language is so isolating. Did you struggle with that? Like translating or trying to understand other people? Because you haven't used really a single Scientology word this whole time, which is pretty awesome.
One thing that kind of helped me to, I guess, isolate the language was I went completely into a different environment that had its own language.
That's true.
So I had to, and I was also, again, I'm 27 years old. The imposter syndrome that I experienced, like trying to show up to do a normal life. I didn't start conversations with, hi, I'm Mike. I'm a recovering Scientologist. I would only share my story with very close friends. And only once we were very close friends. Other than that, I was just Mike that worked harder than everybody else. Dude, you need to stop working so hard. You're going to make us look bad. But it wasn't normal for me to share like my background. And when I finally did, like me doing this now, I had no one, because moving to the military, I'm geographically in areas where there is no Scientology. So as a result, there's very few former Scientologists. A lot of former Scientologists, for whatever reason, tend to still stay in the similar geographical area that they were when except for some exceptions to that. But I didn't have access to friends to process it. when you explain this to your friends, you're like, bro, that's a wild story. But that doesn't process anything. We have to talk about it with somebody else with
Totally.
shared experience. And that's an opportunity that I never had. So
Mhm.
me starting to share my mother's story and deciding, well, I guess I'll share my story too, for me has been the first therapeutic approach to sharing the trauma that I experienced. But I'm doing it both for myself and that so I might be able to share what my truth is in hopes that it might help other people not get involved in a similar organization. That's what I hope.
Such an interesting catalyst. I mean, interesting that it was your mom's situation that prompted this whole thing. I love it. Whatever.
I didn't want to make extra waves for her because I was really in the mindset of I really
Mhm.
thought she wanted to be in this church. And
Mm.
I guess she really did, but she only really did because she was so
Thought she
indoctrinated
did.
into it. When I realized how badly they had taken advantage of her and how much they destroyed her life, and she had given them 35 years of her life and they had taken so much from her, I was just like,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to get you out and then I'm going to start to expose this in hopes that we can help other people who are in the same situation or force change by making it uncomfortable for them to not change.
Totally. I love that. And I feel like that's a common thread that we do see is that you're talking about you were willing to walk away and just let it go, right? Not come back, not go after anyone, except they fucked with a vulnerable person. Like you were not going to fight for your child rights or the atrocities that you experienced necessarily. And I think a lot of people do that like about their children typically, and you're doing it about
Yeah.
your mom. And I love that. And so I think that is a common thread. So I'm just curious. Speaking out publicly is personal, and you sacrifice so much, and it's a door that most people want to close. So, is there any consequence to you speaking out now publicly at this point, like to the military, to your family? Just you're just comfy in this situation.
My wife and I, we talked about this first. And I'm like, hey, we've had some private investigators mainly like trying to harass my mother and kind of, sitting outside of
Mm,
our house and
you
taking
did say that.
pictures. And honestly, we talked about it first and say, hey, what's the worst they're going to do? Put up a hate website about me. They could, call Child Protective Services and like they did on Mark and Claire and try to tell them they're bad parents. I have nothing to hide from these people. I will again put in my disclaimer. Me sharing this is not as a member of the United States military. Me sharing this as a private citizen who has the ability to tell his First Amendment experience. We were in this religious group, if you want to call it that. It's this cult, this experience that we were placed into, and us
Mm,
sharing our story is our First Amendment right to do so. So
totally.
we have our freedom, not only freedom of the press for us to share this story, but it was also our religious experience. This is our experience in that organization. And if
Right.
it's just, oh, you're an apostate and you want to ruin the church, honestly, I don't give a shit if they succeed or if they don't succeed. I
Hmm.
do want them to be accountable for the things that they're doing and hurt people. And
Right.
if they're going to continue as an organization, they should reform. And if they don't reform, they should be held accountable. And if they're held accountable and they reform, they can do I don't care if they believe in all of the crazy that they believe. That is their constitutional right to do so. But the fact that they
Hmm.
have weaponized the First Amendment protections of individuals to then apply
Mm.
to a corporate entity is shameful.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that is where we need to draw the line and say, hey, if corporations are disguising themselves as religions and then taking people and taking advantage of them, especially protected populations that are vulnerable, children and the
Yep.
elderly, that is where I draw
Right.
the line on, you know what? If it's a consenting adult, I still think that there's some problems in it because there's a lot of undue influence. But when it comes to these vulnerable populations, that's where I'm here to talk about it. So we've
Hmm.
talked about my
Hmm.
childhood. We've talked about the experience of manipulation of families, and and I'm a big proponent of talking about the elder abuse, and that's where they're not going to get rid of me about it. So our family expects a little bit of harassment. Factually, if they do so, like I've been out of Scientology for so long and they have their suppressive person declare where they said that all the membership agreements are already canceled and stuff. It's not in their
Mm.
best interest to mess with me. And I'll put this out here. If anyone in Scientology would like to either personally or on the internet discuss any of the details that I've talked about in this, I am 100% open to do so. The information on how to contact me is very clear on my YouTube channel. They can get a hold on me a lifetime ago, 101 at gmail.com is the email address that I have set up for my channel. And they can get a hold of me. We can discuss it in person, or openly debate these things. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first one to say that I am. But I have a bunch of paperwork that probably says that they're doing illegal shit. So maybe they
Oh,
could take it.
totally. You have so many
So
receipts. It's just crazy between your
Mhm.
mom and you. And I agree with you. I feel like any of us that experience this ourselves, we're willing to talk about it to anyone that's interested in talking about it, not fighting over policies or what L. Ron Hubbard would say about it, but human to human discussing our experience because these are facts. These are not feelings. We're not talking about our feelings
absolutely.
about something. It's my last serious question. This really intentional stigma about being a victim, complaining, being weak, afraid, asking for help, being vulnerable, or not tough enough. And that those issues are also not uncommon for males in regular society. So
Mhm.
X-Men, I feel like, really get this double whammy of having to be tough and so resolute. And so I'm just curious, was it hard for you, or how did you navigate victimhood and then arrive to survivorhood? Or did you just skip right through it?
I've tried to keep a growth mindset. So
Mm,
the way that I process trauma, and I'll probably be the first to say that there's probably trauma that I haven't processed, but I try to look at things from a learning perspective on where I can take what I experienced and where
mm,
I could go from here because I feel like I have a lot of responsibilities that I have to keep
yeah.
looking forward. It's hard for me to look back. So for me to take and do this, I know I'm putting myself in the position where I'm talking about my trauma. And as such, I understand that I was a victim, but I've tried to, and I've gotten at least to the point where I'm going to frame it for myself of what did I learn from that and where can I go from this point forward. And I know that approach doesn't work for everybody, but that's at least what the way that I try to deal with my own personal shit. So,
Mhm,
and I don't do great at that at all times, but I at least try to frame the thing of, okay, I have to keep on keeping on. So I can't stop and just say, I have to, I can't go anymore because I have people that are beholden to me that need me to be
mhm,
there and provide and to do my job both at work and then in my personal life. So I've tried
mhm,
to take the trauma that I have and try to refocus that on how it could be different moving forward. How can I learn
mhm.
something from it? And that's the main thing, I guess, is a growth mindset. So that's what I'm trying to work towards.
I love that. That makes sense. And I feel like I did the same thing. I just left with what can I take away that was my lesson and how can I do better with this? And so there wasn't a lot of focus on crying or complaining because I had to get going and find a life. And it just didn't seem productive or constructive to do that. I can do therapy and work through some of these things and actually examine them because there are
Yeah.
emotions and they don't go away because you put them in a closet.
I probably need to cry about some shit and I haven't. Let me put
Yeah.
it that way. So,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So therapy or no therapy? These are just
Um,
yes or no or whatever, however, whatever you want.
I would say yes, and it's sometimes it's problematic for
Mhm.
pilots. So
Yeah.
for me, therapy is something that is not an available resource because you can't pursue therapy and also be in therapy while also being a
Interesting.
pilot, both for the FAA or for the military. So for me, I've
Okay.
had to come up with my own solutions for this, which are
Your own
talking about like the
therapies.
growth mindset. But that's
Yeah.
why I'm kind of like talking about these things is somewhat therapeutic for me. So I'm enjoying
Sure.
doing that. And I also do a lot of studying on my own, not trying to be my own therapist, but I do realize at a certain point when I'm moved on and I'm no longer doing aviation as a career, I probably need to focus on therapy. It's just right now, if I
Mm,
need to compartmentalize that for now, that's kind of the decision that I'm going to, I'm not dysfunctional, but at the same time, I realize that at some point therapy will be beneficial.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It's very honest. All right. Religion or spirituality?
Spirituality.
Okay. Any Scientology word that you just can't quit?
I've tried very hard to find parallels between actual therapies and actual
Mm,
technology that
mm,
was pretty much repurposed so that
mm.
I don't use the vernacular. And because I left so much and went to a completely different life, I've had to kind of
Yeah.
pull up my second language of Scientology things in order to talk about them.
Okay.
But
So
I
interesting.
prefer not to
Mm,
use the Scientology language because it's very limiting. So it's not that there isn't Scientology things that would work. It's like the way that they do things is the dumbest way
mm.
possible. And they get some results. Yes, it creates euphoric states
I
and it kind of makes you
totally
feel
agree
better
with you.
temporarily, but it
Yeah,
is
totally.
not the smartest approach or the most direct approach to getting a result. It's the equivalent of a pharmaceutical drug company that wants to keep you beholden and on drugs and not solve the actual problem. That is
Totally.
Scientology counseling. They
Yeah, yeah.
literally just want to harvest money from you.
That's true.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. take away all your real tools and then tell you you can only use these tools which don't work. And so it's really this self-fulfilling failure prophecy, to be honest. And then they just keep trying to misdirect and cover it up.
One of the main purposes of me sharing my story and communicating in the way I do is not to communicate with Scientologists. It's to communicate with either former Scientologists or people that have never been in Scientology in hopes that they never will be. So
Sure.
that's, I think, why I try to stay away from the Scientology vernacular, because every time you say something, you have to then describe it. And they mess around with a vocabulary so much that I just like to stay away from it. Anyway.
I agree with that. And I think, Steve Hassan talks a lot about using loaded language. And the only way to leave a cult mind think behind is to stop using those things that were connectors in your brain so they stop firing and so that you can actually move on. So that makes really good sense. That is all. Those are all my questions.
That was quite the haul.
Made it.
We did pretty
Well,
good.
that was good. We did great.
Well, good
Well,
stuff.
thank you so much. That was
Thank
brilliant.
you. I
Thank
really
for
appreciated
taking
you guys
so
having me
much
here.
time, and we enjoyed it. Trafficking of children involves recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, receipt of children for the purpose of exploitation. Child exploitation may involve forced labor, slavery, servitude, debt bondage. Child labor is a form of work that may be hazardous to the physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development of children, and it can interfere with education, development, and psychological well-being. If you or someone that you know has been human trafficked, help is available. There will be more information at the end of this presentation. Thank you.